Icarus, the stream is live now. I'm gonna make you host back again. John is your co-host for this class.
Great, thanks. Hi, John. How you doing? Hi, Kathy. How are you? You're muted, but I got that hello.
I'm good. Hello. How are you doing?
Very good. Hi, Darla. Hi, Johnny. Hi, Lynn. Hi, Deborah. Hi, Cheryl. Cheryl Ann.
Hi.
I recognize Cheryl Ann. We were in you were in another one of my classes recently about writing. I think was it the
Yes, it was writing.
was it maybe the 7 questions class or 6 questions class?
Oh, how to
Or how to-
publish a book. That
How to
one.
self-publish. Very good.
Self-publish. Yeah.
Hi, Deborah. Welcome. And I've got Lynn's iPad twice. We will have Lynn, unless there could be 2 Lynn's that have an iPad. If you wouldn't mind putting in the chat where you're from, then we can see where everyone's hailing from today. Deborah's from Pittsburgh. Tell me where, Deborah, in Pittsburgh. You're muted.
I'm out.
Oh, you muted again by accident.
Unmute. All right.
Gotcha.
Technically, I'm outside of Pittsburgh in Plumboro.
I know Plumboro.
Next to Oakmont.
Okay, very good. My wife is a true native of Pittsburgh, and I lived there for 10 years, and I've lived in Western Pennsylvania for another 25. And I love Pittsburgh. I've often said that if I weren't here, I would be in Pittsburgh. But now my wife has another new second place. She loves Richmond. So I think Pittsburgh is just a delightful city, and it's reinvented itself
to go on the camera, do you just press
in a great way. From Steel City to, I don't know what you call it, what it calls itself these days. Nonprofit city isn't a very nice way to put it.
No, it's still the Steel City.
It's still, that's right.
Cause of the Steelers.
It's, or as someone from Southwestern would say, is steel the still city. They always got the still and the steel backwards.
We had snow this morning on the ground, just a little bit.
Ooh, that's painful. That's painful. I've got high winds and 50s here, and it's supposed to get down into the 30s tonight. So we got Santa's wife with us here today. I just noticed. Welcome, Mrs. Claus, and hi. And the person with iPad, I recognize you. I forgot your name. You want to rename yourself? If you just unmute yourself.
Unmute. Yes.
Your name is?
Oh my God. I can't even spell.
That's okay. Me neither. Good to see you all today. Joyce. Hi, Joyce. Good to see you. I recognize Joyce from other classes. Got a lot of regulars here. I'm going to just look here, and we have Darla's from Yulee, Florida. Welcome, Darla. I think this might be, is this your first class with me? Maybe. Very good. Nice to see you.
It is.
Okay, Deborah's from Pittsburgh, and we've just had a conversation about where in Pittsburgh. That's great. That's one of my favorite cities. I love where I live now. I'm not moving anywhere, but I do still have part of my heart in Pittsburgh. I'll just reminisce for a second. I used to be a Steelers fan from the old Steelers, like the 70s. And I was always a Pittsburgh Pirate fan. My favorite baseball player of all time was Roberto Clemente. And what a player. Anyway, we're not here to talk about baseball. Kathy is from Richmond. Now, Kathy, that's nice to hear. Where in Richmond are you from?
I
What
live
part?
out in the West End. In Rico. So we're just in a beautiful suburban area.
It is beautiful. How close are you to University of Richmond?
Not far.
Okay. I
VC
know the area
good.
well. My son
Mhm.
just graduated last year from University of Richmond. He didn't get a
Oh, yeah.
commencement, but he did graduate. And he lives in the Fan.
Yeah, we're further west.
I know,
We're
yeah.
further
No,
west.
I know the area. I know everywhere. I know the area between the Fan and U of R pretty well.
Mhm.
Let's see. So Kathy's from Richmond, two of my favorite cities, Pittsburgh, Richmond. Cheryl Ann's from Lower Peninsula. I like it. The cold part of the Lower Peninsula.
Yeah.
Warm part, I guess, huh?
Well, a little bit of snow, flurries, and we're like done. I hope. So,
Johnny is from Houston. Welcome, Johnny. Mary is from Temecula, California. I hope I got the Temecula right. Is that okay? Super. And her parents are in Carnegie. Wow, Carnegie's quite a town. Been by Carnegie a lot. Probably got off the interstate there by accident once or twice in my life. And Mrs. Claus is from the North Pole. Well, the sun is shining in behind you today, so we're glad to know that. And if anyone else wants to put in the chat where you're from, we all appreciate it. That way we get to know each other. I'm really glad to have you all here today. And we have John, pardon me, our Get Set Up TA, who can help. Today, besides having put your name in the chat, you are invited to put questions into the chat, and John will help field those questions for me. But also, we have a small enough class today that I'll pause frequently, and I'd be happy for any of you to ask questions when I take a pause. This is a class, everyone has a story to tell, which is really about how to start writing a memoir. I know sometimes it could be called how to write a memoir. This is really about how to start, because I've worked with a lot of people over the years who have stories, not just like you're older and you got a memoir you want to write, but they're younger and they have got a bunch of stories they want to tell and they don't know where to start. So hopefully today's class gives you some ideas where to start. And Joyce has got her pencil out, so she is going to start.
Oh.
She's ready for us. I like to see that. That's a person she's ready to start writing. Fabulous. I got my pencil here, Joyce. Well, you can't see it, can you? How do you see that thing? I gotta get it right up by I'm using this virtual background. There's my pencil. It's a mechanical one here, but I got a can full of pencils here in front of me as well. So I'm a pencil and pen person, and I'm actually a fountain pen person. Martha, pardon me, is a snowbird between Alexandria and Florida. Yes, Martha, I think we've had this conversation before about Alexandria. Yes, I remember. That's not far from me, about 2 hours. Lovely, lovely town. I like Alexandria. Well, let me share my screen with you and start here. And you should see something that says, where is it? Everyone has a story to tell. That's showing on your screen. Okay, great. We're all on the same virtual page as I start. Like to say that. I'm Russ Eanes, your guide. I'm from Harrisonburg, Virginia, which is in the lovely Shenandoah Valley of Western Virginia. We're about 2 hours west of Richmond, and we're about 2 hours southwest of Alexandria, 4 hours southeast of Pittsburgh, just to give you a place on the map. Harrisonburg's college town. I love it here. James Madison University. I'm a writer, a walker, and a cyclist, and I formerly was a book publisher. So that's where I come into this thing about writing memoirs and books. Plus, I've written my own. So I've come at it from many angles. But when I was a publisher, my favorite thing was to help an author shape their ideas into a book. And one of the things I love to do today is to help older learners figure out how to write their story, because I figure by the time you've turned 55 or 60, you better be writing your story down, even if it's just on a few scraps of paper, because the time may come when you don't get it written down and it's too late. And I hope that's not anytime soon for anybody in here today. I love the energy I get from working with you all. I'm now a full-time guide with Get Set Up, and I love this job. Get Set Up helps you learn useful skills from people like you, so you can do wonderful things. So you learn, like I said, Get Set Up, you can learn about everything from how to set up the apps on your iPhone to how to choose the right red wine for supper. We learn from each other in these classes, and ideally we can see you and your cameras are on. You can request a recording of this class after the class. Email help@getsetup.io and they'll send you a link. If you're joining by live stream, and we are live streaming today, the best way to participate is to join us and register for a class, and you can be live and ask questions. And by the way, Get Set Up's not paid to promote any specific products. We are strictly an educational organization. Here's our agenda today. I want to introduce you all to the idea of a memoir. Hint, it is not the same as an autobiography. I'm going to discuss why telling stories is vital. We're going to look at some easy prompts for writing a story. That's what a lot of people get stuck on. What can prompt me? And we're going to learn how to use family, a writing group, or beta readers to help you write your memoir. So first of all, what is your story? Okay, an autobiography is technically defined as the story of your life. Heard a good joke recently. Someone asked an Irishman when he was in a little village, they said, "Have you lived here all your life?" And he said, "Not yet." Anyway, an autobiography is pretty complete from beginning to end. A memoir, what I call a memoir, is a story or the story of a part of your life. Okay, that's my definition. And frankly, I don't know that there is any technical definition for it. It's a very popular genre in literature today. It's been a very popular genre for decades. I like to say that a memoir is not as comprehensive as a biography. Okay, so it can just be a story about something. It could be a story about an experience. Maybe you took a trip somewhere and you want to write a memoir about that. Maybe it's short, maybe it's long. Maybe you lived abroad for a few years. Maybe you had an interesting job, or your family was a fascinating family. You want to tell a bit of a story about that. A memoir about part of your life. And a memoir, I always tell people, if you're writing a life story, is an easy way to start, because you don't have to think, oh, I got to tell the whole thing. So I got to figure out, when was I born? Where were my parents born? No, it's much shorter. And a memoir can tell something about you throughout your life, by the way. You can talk about an aspect of yourself through your life. And I'll talk a little bit about that as I talk a bit about my own life in some of the memoirs I have written or plan to write someday. I'm going to give you now, just to get your mind going. I'll come to your question in 1 second, Martha. I thank you for raising your hand. I'm going to talk about some specific ideas of some memoirs to help you get your mind going. But let me entertain Martha's question right off the bat. Yes, Martha. And make sure you unmute yourself. We're still waiting for you to get unmuted. Maybe John can help here. There you go.
Okay. I wonder, can a memoir be about someone else instead of me?
It can.
Yes.
It can. And that's a question I get asked a lot in this class, because many people have collected stories or want to tell about their parents or a sibling, aunt and uncle, grandparent. And, I think that's perfectly valid. In fact, there's someone who's was in this class several times. So she's collected stories of her father from about 60 to 70 years ago that she wants to tell. So,
Well, my idea was to tell memoirs of popular people in the limelight. Not anyone in my family. Has that been done?
oh, certainly. So you're probably branching out a little bit beyond memoir, because the one thing I like to say about memoir is it has to have an attachment to personal experience. To be within the genre of memoir, in my opinion. Someone could correct me, but because a lot of literary definitions are fuzzy and made up, you can say it, but that's more like writing short biographies of people or short things about someone's life. And I've certainly got those. Books on my shelf like that. In fact, I've got a book sitting somewhere near here about travel writers. But in that case, the writer of the book was interviewing those people. So you're thinking more like short biographies or short stories about people. So that's a little different. Certainly a valid thing to write, but it would probably fall more in the category of short biographies about people. A book that comes to mind right away is a very famous book written by President John F. Kennedy called Profiles in Courage. That one kind of popped into my head right away, about a person who's written stories about particular topics. Good question.
Thank you.
Any more questions at this point? Let me go on. I'll give you some examples of some memoirs that I find help people get their creative juices going. And the first one I'm going to show up, and hopefully you can see it here. Yeah. This virtual background doesn't always help with showing things. This is a book called Enchantment and Despair, Childhood Memories from Montana, 1925 to 1937, by my friend Cal Redekop. Cal Redekop is 95 years old. He's had quite a life. He is well known as a college professor, worked in academia for 50 years. He's now retired, but still sharp as a tack at 95 years old. He grew up in Montana nearly 100 years ago. This story is from 1925 to 1937. This is the story of his family's farm in Montana, and they lived there during the Dust Bowl. Basically, the farm failed. And so the story is fascinating from many points of view. If you want to read about a farm family out on the prairies 100 years ago, how they were eking out a living, it's a great story. If you want to hear a story just about a farming family anywhere, it's a great story. But also it tells something about Cal. Cal became an early leader in the environmental movement, and he taught things about the environment within academia. And that came out of his experience as a child living on a failed farm in the Dust Bowl. So that's why this book is important. And by the way, he just gives this book away. He's published it. It's done by Friesens, which is a publisher, a large printing house actually in Canada, and they have a self-publishing arm that helps people self-publish their own books. Here's another example of a memoir that I just picked up the other day by a guy named Robert Penn, who's from Wales, and it's all about the bike. It's about his idea of what an ideal bike would be like, and it just tells about his life in bicycling. So it gives you that great idea. It's about one aspect of his life, about how much he loves bicycling, building bikes. Another example I have here, and this is something I found in my mother's papers after she died, and it is let's see, how many pages in this? It's a 37-page, just typewritten manuscript. That's all there is, 37 typewritten pages. It's called A Memoir by Albert L. Bethel. He was my mother's second husband. My father died in 2004. She remarried at the end of 2005, an old family friend. And then my mother died in 2007. When I was cleaning out her papers, I found this. And Al had written a memoir for his children, just 37 pages. But it tells a little bit about his growing up in Missouri, about his going to West Point in the Second World War, and then all the places the Army sent him in the 1940s and 1950s. And then eventually he went to work as an engineer at Westinghouse. But he doesn't tell that story. It was mostly about the fascinating experiences he had in the Army, because they sent him all over the world after the Second World War. And it tells a lot about his life. And it's not very long, 37 pages. It's typewritten. Doesn't have to be all that hard. He said that it was initiated by a request that he speak at his 60th high school class reunion in 1999. 60th reunion. Wow. How many of us think we'll make it to the 50th? He's at his 60th. And so he decided to expand it and give it to his children. So this is something I wish my own father had written. A friend of mine, I don't have an example here, but he's the father of my daughter-in-law. He went to Thailand in the 1970s as an exchange student. And he had such the experience impacted him so much that it's stayed with him all these years. So we're talking nearly 50 years on. I think might have even been 1970. And he wanted to share this with his grandchildren. So he wrote just a memoir about the experiences of going to Thailand as an exchange student, just like a 3-4 month experience, but it really impacted him. And he has a journal he'd written, and he transcribed the journal, and he found all the photographs he had, and he found copies of his plane ticket and receipts from taxi rides and a restaurant menu. And he laid it all out in just a very nice, it's actually just in PDF form right now. He wants to get it printed, but it's just telling about this experience that impacted his whole life, this exchange student experience in Thailand. So there are many ways we can think about doing a memoir. It doesn't have to be like, this is my whole life. I wrote a book. This is my self-published book called The Walk of a Lifetime. It's not showing up very well, is it? 500 miles on the Camino de Santiago, which I published in I'm learning how to use this virtual background. That doesn't come out very well. It's called The Walk of a Lifetime, 500 miles on the Camino de Santiago. It's my memoir of a 500-mile walk that I did in 2018, actually just about 6 weeks of my life, but what an impact it had upon me to do that pilgrimage. And so all these are can be called memoir, in my opinion. So this helps broaden people's thinking, because sometimes we can tell about an aspect of our life, and that tells something about us that we want other people to know. Okay, so here's what I tell people. And this is, if you get one thing out of this class, I hope it's this single sentence. Don't write the beginning, begin to write. So a lot of folks, they want to write a memoir about something, or they want to write a story about their life. And they always say, I don't know where to begin, or I don't know how the beginning should be. And I say, don't worry about that. Just begin to write. Create the pieces that you want to put together into that memoir or that story. You don't have to have the whole thing conceived of. You don't have to know where it begins. I'm actually working on another memoir right now. Last fall, I took a bike trip from Pittsburgh to Washington, D.C. along a rails to trails and on the C&O towpath. No traffic for 355 miles. It's a bit of a memoir about that trip. It's also a story about how that trail came into existence and what it's like to ride it. I don't know exactly what the beginning is going to look like, but I'm writing it, and then eventually I'll assemble all the pieces. So let me give you an idea. And this is one I often tell people, is to start with a photo. Now, let me tell you, this doesn't have to be a photo that you want to use in a memoir or a photo that's going to be in some story. It could just be an exercise in writing, okay? But I say photos are one of the best writing prompts you can have. So I've got a photo of my family. These are my siblings. I'm the little guy in blue. I'm probably about, 3 or 4 years old in this picture. And we're all dressed up. My sister looks like she has on her Easter dress, but we probably just came home from church some Sunday, and my dad got us all lined up. And we're on a swing set behind our house in Pittsburgh. Okay, so what? 4 kids on a swing set. What does that mean? Well, let me tell you, there's a lot of stories about this swing set. The first story is that swing set is behind the house. And behind the house, besides the swing set, there were a lot of woods. And all my life, I've loved living near the woods or with the woods around me somewhere. And that was my first experience with it. Was I can remember going out in that house and playing in the woods on fallen trees and running around, grabbing sticks as a kid. And in fact, right now where I live, I'm looking out my window right now at the woods behind my house because I own about 1.25 acres here in Harrisonburg, and all the houses here have a wooded area behind them. It's a wooded slope. There's no construction on it. The city's just on the other side of that. So that's one thing that I can tell about my life. I've always loved living near the woods, and the image of the swing set right away brings to my mind the image of the backyard. But there's a better story that has to do with this swing set. About 2 years after this picture was taken, I was on this swing set with my second oldest brother, the one right here who's sitting on a swing. He's 9 years older than me. I was 5 years old. He was 14. And I have no idea why my mother knew this or thought this or said it, but she said to me one day, you know, you're going to be the tallest one in the family of the kids, which was kind of funny to me. Actually, I shouldn't just say the kids. My two brothers and I are all taller than both of my parents. But anyway, I don't know why she thought that, because I was always a short kid in school. I was always one of the shortest kids, you know, and they lined you up in the classroom by height, and they put the tall kids in the back and the short kids in the front. I was always like in the first or second row. I didn't really like that. It was kind of embarrassing to be so short, especially when I got older, you know, and the girls were all taller than me. But anyway, that's another whole story. I said to my brother, Mom says I'm going to be the tallest one in the family. And of course, brother number 2 at that point was the tallest one in the family. He was taller than brother number 1. And he said, no, you won't. I said, yes, Mom says I'm going to be the tallest one in the family. I'll bet you $5 that by the time I'm 20, I'm taller than you. And he said, you're on. And he reached out and we shook hands. He was 14, I was 5. Well, I was on this swing set, probably doing the same thing I'm doing there now, just a couple of years older. And we reminded each other of that bet for the next 15 years. And sure enough, by the time I was about 16, I was taller than him. And my brother took this very well. He was very good spirited about it. He said, and I said, you know, I'm taller than you now. He says, yeah, but the bet was you got to be taller than me by 20. You never know. You might shrink between 16 and 20 and I'll be taller than you. Well, I got even taller. And sure enough, when I turned 20, I got in the mail a book, and inside of it was a $5 bill. So he not only gave me my bet, $5, he gave me a book along with it. I didn't make any claim to inflation between 1962 and 1977, you know, was probably worth $10 then. That's okay. I didn't. And it's just a great story about a little kid, you know, saying something and remembering a bet all those years, and my brother being very good spirited about it. So that all comes from just looking at that swing set. So I tell folks that are looking for something to write about, little vignettes of your life are a great thing for other people to hear. And they give you an idea. In this case, they give me an idea of where I lived and what the things that mattered to me, i.e. the woods. But more importantly, it gives someone the story, a sense of how it was with my siblings and how we interacted with each other. I was the youngest of 4 kids. And yet, you know, I turned out to be the tallest, and, you know, I kind of got revenge on them all by being taller. And that all comes from just looking at a photo. So I tell people, pull out a photo, and if you have some memories associated with it, start writing. It's a great way just to start writing. Remember, don't write at the beginning, just begin to write. Okay, so here's another writing prompt. And again, I'll bring again about me. That's me. And I'm in a crib, and I am probably 2.5, though I don't know exactly how old I am. I suppose I should get the photo out sometime and look at it. It's probably dated. And there is a Childcraft book across my chest. I grew up with a set of these Childcraft books, along with a set of World Book encyclopedias. And I love books from the earliest I can remember. And I had a box of golden books I dragged around the house before I went to school, and I would sit and flip through those all day. And then I loved looking at these Childcraft books because there were 2 volumes. One was just poems for little kids and nursery rhymes, and the other one was like story poems. They were longer poems, and there might have been a few short stories in there, beautifully illustrated. I couldn't read, so I'm just dragging them out, and I'm looking at the pictures in the books. Apparently fell asleep with the book on my chest, And I don't know if I've been taking a nap or whether this was bedtime or what. But here's the important thing about this. I have been a lifelong lover of books. Okay. Hint, I became a book publisher eventually. I'm now working as a writer. Looks like that thread has continued on through my life. But I also have enjoyed, have appreciated what I've learned out of books. And I could sit and list for you books that impacted me when I was in grade school, books that impacted me when I was in junior high or high school or college, or books that have impacted me my whole life. You can't see it because I've got a virtual background here, but there's bookcases all around me. Some of the books I've read, some are just books I've collected. And I love books so much. I even just collect books for how they're designed. Okay. If there's particularly unique design about a book, I might even just buy a copy and put it on the shelf because I love the design of books. I love how they feel. I love what you get from reading a book. I love the experience of reading. I love touching the paper. I love the smell of the paper. I love feeling the binding on the book, kind of resist as you open it up. I love books that lay flat open. That says something about my life, all prompted by this photograph. So I encourage people to say, pick a photograph that maybe says something about some aspect of your life. And you could, if you want to just write something up with an essay, you can insert the photograph. If you use Word or Google Docs, you can insert photos right in there because they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. So I always say, if you put a picture in, write 1,000 words about it. But again, a photograph is a fabulous writing prompt. Now, what are some of the ideas you have for writing? And I'm going to stop the sharing here in a minute and ask people to talk a little bit. This, by the way, is my grandson. And this is a few years ago. He's now 14. But when he was 11, my son gave him a typewriter. And he brought it over to the house one Sunday afternoon. And he sat and he typed a story for 2 solid hours. So apparently the idea of writing is caught on and stuck in the family. He was just making the story up as he went. Let me stop the share for a minute here and let's just talk a minute and see if I'll come back and share a little bit more. Check out any comments or questions in the chat. And again, you're welcome to put anything in the chat you'd like. But anybody here have some things you're hoping to be writing about that you'd like to share or ideas you want to bounce off?
You want to, can we talk or we have to put it in the chat?
You don't have to put in the chat. I'll come to you in 1 second, Joyce. I'll start with Darla because I want to hear you. Darla, raise your hand. So I'll give Darla a chance to say something.
I was just wondering, I had started something, and I don't know if this falls in the memoirs or falls in an autobiography, because I started like with different chapters, like my childhood and education and feelings on places I lived, countries I've traveled to, things I like to do, cars I drove, then why. So where would that fit? Would that be memoirs or would it be a collection of memoirs or?
It just sounds like a great life story, Darla. And I think that's great that you've done that. Your life story, that's great. And that's what I tell people, write your life story. And the reason I often talk about this idea of a memoir is because for some people, it's a little too intimidating. And when you get older, you got a lot more life to write about. But no, it's a life story. It can be called a memoir of your life. There isn't a hard, fast definition. I'm just encouraged to hear that you've written all that.
Yeah, I have. I was just kind of also interested because I was writing it and then I stopped because someone says, well, if you don't write everything about yourself and you don't tell the truth about everything, then what's the point in writing? And I'm thinking, well, maybe I don't want everybody to know everything. So I don't know. So I kind of stopped, but I really need to get back on it.
You know what I say, write what you like.
Okay.
When you're in school, you may have to write for a grade, but when you're older, you can write what you like.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. I'm glad to hear you writing all that, Darla. I really encourage that. Joyce.
When my back, I think 88, my mother had died, and we found letters and postcards that my mother saved. And she saved postcards from the 40s and the 30s. And I had letters that she wrote to my father when he was in the service. He was from Oklahoma, and she was born in North Carolina. My father was born in Oklahoma, and they met. My father was in the service, and he met my great uncle, who was also my godfather, and in Fort Dix, New Jersey. And my great aunt, which is my godmother, she brought my mother on a visit to visit Uncle John A. And that's how my mother and father met. And but anyway, I have postcards she sent with friends. Instead of like we pick up a phone, no, they wrote postcards, you know. And I have a letter written to my grandmother starting from 1931. I have letters and postcards back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, a little more, you know, so it's like a whole lot of stuff. And I have also pictures, you know, like talking about pictures of family, you know, in the early 20th century, you know, on up. And so there's a lot of angles. I guess I could do it, but I guess I procrastinate. I read some of the letters, of course, and sometimes I reread them. So I know there's something to be told, but I just been, I guess, procrastinating. You know, I do genealogy, so I know some of the family, you know, history. So, you know, I just haven't organized myself in how, you know, how to get it done, you know. So, so I got, you know, I got pictures, I got letters, I got postcards, you know. So I just have to know how to begin, you know.
You know, so many people have something like you have, Joyce, and even I have some things like that. And I often joke that the postcards of a century ago were the texts of today, because there's two sentences in the back of a penny postcard.
I never thought of it that way, the text.
I mean, it's just what it was. They said, "Hey, thinking of you, Mary. How are you doing?" Bing goes off in a postcard, and they got the postcard and read it. They sent a postcard back. "Hey, I'm doing well today. Let's get together."
They you know, oh, we're gonna go to this party, you know, so and so and so, you know. I mean, it was like a phone, like you said, a phone call or a text, you know, like what do you use postcards that way? That's how good the mail was back then. Yeah. You know, I mean, you can get the postcard within the same day.
You know, they used to have twice a day mail delivery.
Yes, that's what it was. Yes.
You could get 2 newspapers a day and 2 mail deliveries in a day. You know what I say, take those things, try transcribing a few letters, and then also in some letters or photographs, write something about them. Because here's one little trick that I've learned painfully over the years, is that if someone doesn't write on the back of a photograph or maybe a scan and write something about it, no one may ever discover what that was. And my mother died in 2007, and about 3 or 4 years later, I talked to her cousin. She grew up with this cousin in the same house. Her cousin was several years younger, so her cousin was like her sister. And her cousin told me a bunch of stuff that I didn't understand from looking at my mother's photos. And I'm thinking, why didn't my mother tell me that? I don't think it's because my mother was hiding anything. She just didn't occur to her to tell me who. There was a picture that shows someone named Riri standing next to my mother. So I finally said, "Who's Riri?" And her cousin said, "Oh, you didn't know? She was the the housekeeper wasn't married, and that was Riri's daughter. And I'm going, oh my gosh, there's quite a story there. So yeah, write those things down, whatever you know, because someone later may want to know. And so preserve those things, write them down, and just get a start. Like I said, I know that whole thing about procrastination, that's so common. Just get a start. I like hearing those kinds of stories. And we're often the link between the future, our children, grandchildren, and the past. And, I have a few stories from my grandfather that he told me about his grandfather. And I've told those stories to my grandson. And I've said, that's spanning hundreds of years. And there's just a few of them. But what if they'd all been written down? So anyway, by my great-great-grandfather or someone like that. Anybody else have some things you want to talk about or write about or ideas?
Hey,
Let's
Russ,
see.
hi, Shirley here.
Yes.
My granddaughter, not too long ago, said she was worried about me dying. And I said, well, don't worry about it. She said, well, Grandma, I don't have a recording of your voice. So I said, okay, you got an iPhone, you know how to use it, get it out. And we recorded our conversation, eh? So she will have that after I pass away to look back on. So that's one way, just get on a device and record, and then they got it for later.
That's great. That's great. Yep. Give voice recordings. When my mother-in-law turned 80, we had a party for her, and her two sisters came, and they're both her sisters are younger, by the way. And one of those sisters had recently died. And I because I was the son-in-law, I took it upon myself to sit on the edge and film them all talking. And I'm so glad I have that, because now her one sister's not living anymore. And we have memories of growing up, that stuff that some of the children said we'd never heard of. So yeah, those are great things. I'm going to come to Cheryl and Ann in 1 second. Kathy Dodson had a question. She says, what are some of the most important elements in the telling of your own story to include to move the story along or to create actual interest in what you are sharing? Very good question. So one of the ways to figure that out is to show it to someone else, and show it to two kinds of people. Show it to people like your children or your spouse or siblings who know the story, and they will say, oh yeah, that's a good one, tell that one. Or a child might say, well, I never heard about that. But then also tell it to someone who's not related to you and who may not know this about you. And then they can give their opinion of what's important. Another way to do it is to ask a friend, a child, a spouse, a sibling, what are some things that you'd like to hear about? And one of my sons is great on that. He says he has this a period of my life he doesn't know much about. He calls it the lost years. He says, I don't know what you were doing between the age like 19 and 24. Tell me what was going on in those years. I'm like, well, I got married, about that. But he's like, no, I want to know much more than just some facts about things. Tell me what was going on, because, by the time you turn 25, there was all sorts of stuff going on in your life that I've heard about. So I've taken that to cue that son asked me that particular question, because chances are more than one person or more than one child wonders the same thing. So ask other people. And again, ask those who are more intimate, who know you well, related to you, and friends, maybe people that don't know you so well. Another example I'll give here, I have been working, so I'm now working full-time with GetSet, but I still on the side work a little bit occasionally, because previously when I was freelancing, I consulted with people a lot who had publishing ideas. And I have a friend who's on a long-range quest to tell his life story. By long range, I mean, I think it's going to take him 10 years because he's still working and he needs more time. He has the most incredible story I've ever heard. He witnessed the death of his father and his uncle in a drowning accident when he was 5. His uncle was 10, his father was in his 20s. And then his mother remarried a few years later. And then when he was 17, his mother died. And then when he got married when he was 20, and then when he was 40, his first wife died. And then he remarried. And then when he was 62, his second wife died. And I said, Roy, you've had more encounters with death than anyone I know. I mean, this is tragic. I mean, we all have parents that die, but not when we're 5. And so he's on a quest to tell this story starting deep in his past. And he's found people who want to tell stories about his father that he never heard. So there are many, and I'm someone that doesn't know him all that well. So I identified that thing that, Roy, you need to talk about how death has impacted you. He's a very happy person, by the way. He's not a person who's depressed or unhappy. He's actually quite a strong and a person with a lot of faith. But anyway, sometimes a person is a little more objective. I've only known Roy for about 2 or 3 years. So anyway, Cheryl Ann, you had a question.
Yes, I enjoyed your class. It kind of lit something in me when you said we were talking about memoirs, and then what people don't know. And then I'm just, because I feel like there's this like, and I think we discussed it, a block, or I can't seem to get started, or there was something in my way. But anyways, I'm more excited than I've been in a long time. So thank you. But I was thinking I've done, I don't know if you can see, but I do scrapbooking and watercolor. And I just thought what a perfect way maybe to start. It's it's a creative way, this with the painting, and then important inspiration pieces people have said over the years, but they all were picked, and when I painted it, for a specific reason. So anyways, I don't know, I'm excited, I guess is more what I want to say, for what you've done. So.
I love your paintings. I mean, I can't paint, so to be able to do that is really fabulous. My mother-in-law that I mentioned, who's now about to turn 85, is an artist. And recently her second husband, made a book for her and for all her children of all her paintings. It's a big book. She's done watercolor. She's done oils. She's done mixed media, and she's done cards. And he's collected all them into a book for her. And sometimes there's just maybe a line or two about the painting, but I see that as something that she's left for her children. And she's still living. She can't paint much anymore because she has pretty advanced Parkinson's, but these are all things that people should tell. John is saying that you have many stories to write of family, Iraq war, etc. You procrastinate as well. We all procrastinate. Let me give you also one little hint about getting things down. And Rats, my cell phone's sitting in the other room, but your cell phone has a dictation feature. Okay, it used to be in the early days, these were specialized things you had to put on a phone. Well, you can open a document in Google Docs, which is free, or if you have Word has a dictation feature. And if you don't know what to say or do, just sit down and dictate into it or into your phone. And it's it'll transcribe it, so it's all written down. And that's a very handy way to get ideas, thoughts, memories down. And remember, whatever you start with, what I call the first draft, doesn't have to be any good. It could be good. It could be perfect. It could be the best draft you've ever written, but it doesn't have to be any good. I'll tell you a secret. Real writers, people that are very good, famous writers, refer to the first draft as the vomit draft. It means you kind of just get it all out. And it doesn't necessarily have to be any good, but it's all out there now. You know what you're working with, and you shape it in. You improve the prose, you improve the writing, you get rid of this, and you remember to add that. So I just tell people, get writing, get something down. And if you just don't feel like you know where to start typing with your fingers, start dictating. By the way, what you speak and what you write with a tool like a typewriter, word processor, or pen are different. So don't worry about that. They're different. I tend not to speak in the same way that I write. And here's one more last little thing, and this sounds kind of crazy to some people. I actually use a typewriter, not all the time, but I use the typewriter sometimes because typing forces me to slow down. And then later I can pick it out and I can underline the things that seem to be worthwhile. What happens when I use a word processor is I type a sentence. Oh, no, that's no good. And zip, I delete the whole thing. Well, I've now robbed myself in the future of seeing what I thought in the past, even if it wasn't very good. So there are different styles of writing. You can write by hand, you can write by typewriter, you can word process, you can dictate. And I say utilize any of them and all of them. So I have a pad here. It's like, I don't know, 5 by 7 inches or something like that. And there's about it is, it's a spiral bound at the top. And sometimes I'm sitting up early in the morning and I just start, all of a sudden, a whole bunch of thoughts about the book I'm writing come to my mind, and I jot them down there. And then later I take them out and I type them up. And then I take the typewritten copy and I bring it to my word processor. So I go through several iterations. But there's many ways to get it out. Find the method that suits you best. One last little thought about writing. If you're having a hard idea, figuring out what to get down, go to a place where you have very little distraction. In fact, I was going to say, if there's one thing you can learn besides that sentence where I said, don't write the beginning, begin to write. The other thing is, the less distraction you have around you, the easier it is. Now, saying that, sometimes the things that are in my view give me inspiration. So I don't want to, so what I'm teaching you today is sort of my study off the living room. And I always have inspiring things within my sight, some photographs on the wall or some books I appreciate or photos of my family. But if I really want to concentrate and I don't know what to do next, I'll go sit in another room. My favorite places to write is the dining room, because there's very little stimulation around me. The table's nice and clean and clear, and my mind can flow. So that's the other thing, because the things that distract us sometimes are inspiration, but sometimes they distract our mind. They get too many things buzzing inside our heads for us to write. So find a spot that's free of distraction. Another place I love to go is outside, sit out front on our front deck. I find that less distracting and more inspiring. So a few ideas. Any more ideas or comments about writing for anyone, from anyone? Darla.
Yeah, I tried writing. I read this book and I tried writing for 90 days straight. And they said you're supposed to write these 3 pages. Oh my God, I was so glad when it was over, because some days I couldn't even think of anything. It was just too much. It was just, so then I just quit. Once my 90 days was over, it's like, I can't write anymore. So now I'm trying to get back in it on an as needed basis. So anyway, but 90 days was a lot.
That is a lot.
I didn't go back and read it.
I've had those days when, and all the paper says is I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say after. I am hoping to redo this class into a series so that it go over several weeks, and I can cover some of these topics that we've touched on today in a little more depth, and also talk a bit about self-publishing, because I do like people to be able to start with their ideas of something they want to write, and at the end have something they can show for it. Again, it doesn't have to be a book between 2 covers, published like this. It can be anything, but even if it's just that typewritten manuscript, I like to see people have something concrete. Charlotte, did you have something else you want to say? I'm not sure if I saw your hand up or not.
Oh, no, me? No.
Okay, very good.
I wanted to say your class, well, I typed it, but your classes, the ones I've taken have been great. I have struggled with just even being inspired, and I couldn't figure out what it was. I don't know if I really have figured out, but at least there's an inspiration there now.
Well, one other thing I tell writers, anybody that wants, and really, I think everyone should be a writer. The Spanish say that everyone has to publish a book in their life. I love that idea. I tell people you need to read as well. I said this in some of my other classes. I read a manuscript by a guy in his 30s, and I knew he didn't read books. I could just tell from the way he'd written. I also happen to know him personally and know that he didn't read, probably, that he spent way too much time online, because online writing is in little bits and pieces. And a book has more depth to it, but you learn things about writing from writers. One of my favorite writers, the book over here on the shelf is by Annie Dillard. It's called An American Childhood, about her childhood growing up in Pittsburgh. And she's a fabulous writer, but I just go to her for my inspiration, because what did Annie Dillard think was worth saying? So I go and I read Annie Dillard. Well, Martha.
Yes, I wanted to ask you, what would you advise
like me, I have all the different books in my head. What is the best way? Get to all of them a bit at a time or focus on one book at a time?
Martha, I'm just like you. I have about 6 books mapped out in my head to write. And what I've decided is that I have to finish the next one in line. And so I went to Richmond to visit my youngest son, actually, back in February. We were having one of these weeks here in the East Coast, especially I don't know if Richmond is Virginia is considered Northeast or not, but where we were having like a snowstorm every week. And then, in between there might be a break. Well, I drove down to Richmond on one of those breaks between snowstorms. And my son and I went on a walk, about a 6 mile, maybe 8 mile walk through the city. It was a beautiful sunny day in the 50s. So in the middle of winter, the 50s felt like it was, as hot as could be. And it gave me the idea for another book to write. Because if you've taken some of my other classes on travel, you know that I like to walk and bike. And I got the idea of urban walks in Richmond. And it's a combined book about what can you discover by walking through your city. I call those urban walks. And what can you discover about walking through your parents' past? Well, it's a great idea for a book. And I've already written half of it in my head. But I told myself you can't start that book to finish the book you're doing on bicycling. So what I do is write them down, write out the little map of each book and put it somewhere and let it sit. And there you'll come to it.
Okay.
And then write the one that you think has to be written next and stick to it. Oh, and Mary has suggested the book on writing by Stephen King. That's great. He's a great writer. Most of the great writers in the world have written a book about writing. A lot of them have, not all of them. So they're also worthwhile reading. I appreciate this time with you all. We're pretty much out of time. And I do want to go back and share one more thing here on the screen, just so you can get an idea. We're going to skip over here. There's different formats for publishing, which I think a lot of you know about. And I talked to you about sharing your writing. I do a class so you can search my name on the Get Set Up website, 6 questions to ask when thinking of publishing a book. I know some of you have been in that class. And I also do a class on how to self-publish a book. And I'm planning on reworking all that into a series. My next class is, by the way, is not one on walking the Camino de Santiago. Forgot to change that today. I am doing a class today at 7:30 on foods of the Middle East. So some of you have been coming to our evening sessions where we look a little bit at some Rick Steves and then we talk a bit about travel. So tonight we're going to be doing some cuisines and food of the Middle East. Tomorrow, I'm doing a class on Word Basics. So if any of you are people who've maybe dabbled in Word and want to know a little bit more about it, or maybe you're not sure how to start, 10:30 Eastern time, I'll be doing a class on Word. Is there anybody here today who this is your first time with Get Set Up? I forgot to ask that if I had any new Get Set Up folks. I had a feeling like I knew a lot of your names, but I'm doing new member orientation tomorrow at 2:00. And then at 4:00, we'll be doing the history of France as part of our travel series, and a bunch of travel classes next week. Next Tuesday at 2:30, I'm doing a class on travel solo, and that's going to be a panel discussion. So I have 3 learners coming in who are going to share with you about traveling solo. That's next Wednesday, 2:30 Eastern Daylight Time. I'll put that in the chat. In your class notes at the end. Great to see you all this afternoon. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and hope you learned some things. And make sure you give me some feedback when you get your email at the end of this class. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Russ.
Bye.
Thank you.
Hello.
Enjoy the class.
Thank
Bye.
you.